Hey guys, so let's just react to Michelle Stone.
1847,
No offense.
1840.
Not knowing what words meant in 1844. We'll just say that.
Joseph Smith addressed a crowd of over 8,000 and had two documents read. The first was his presidential platform, and the second was the Voice of Innocence from Nauvoo, another of his many statements condemning polygamy.
Get really anal here. I'm going to pull up actual journal. Where are we at? I'm not going to pull it up right there. I don't want to Google and annoy you guys, but it was read first to the men. They did shout amen twice, and then it was read to the women. Emma Smith edited it. So let's just go up here. The Voice of Innocence was amended by Emma Smith. So that's what we got here on the Church Historian Press. So she's showing pictures of Emma's handwriting, editing what W.W. Phelps wrote under the direction of Joseph Smith. It was held at General Smith's Assembly Rooms on Saturdays, the 9th and 16th of March. Unanimous, I mean, they're shouting amen. Because what J.C. Bennett did was absolutely horrible, but and it's in the Joseph Smith papers anyway.
Which says, while the marriage bed undefiled is honorable, let polygamy, bigamy, fornication, adultery, and prostitution be frowned at.
This is the clincher, you guys. Back in the 1840s, I think Michelle Stone is very confused. And anyone that's a part of the that movement, I just don't even want to. I don't know if she's still LDS. I'm not sure. I don't occasionally glance at her channel, but I'm not going to get in the comment section. I had a roommate bring up all this stuff, and I didn't want to watch the video on Midnight Mormons, and I'll go into it maybe a little bit later. I go into it. If you go to my community tab, I share a link to my other channel where I tell like a horrible roommate story without identifying them or getting too specific, but I've had too many people reiterate in horrible ways some lies. Right. And really, someone just got really mad because I dared to disagree with Michelle Stone and her tensities. And, it just, how dare you? It just really was very contentious. And I don't think that person watching Michelle Stone was filled with Christ-like love. I'll just say that. But polygamy in 1840s, I believe that Cochrane, from all the documents I've read, I'm not going to pull them all, but you can watch some of my other videos, but Cochrane lives spiritual wifery, which J.C. Bennett lived, but converted it into, it wasn't just free love, because how many women are willingly going to do that? So then it is inherently abusive, and it just very often just turns into forcing, manipulating. Like, very rarely do these women willingly want to be passed from guy to guy, unless she's been through severe abuse and doesn't know any different. But Cochranites, it was these temporary unions, so there's no commitment. Again, to understand, Chauncey Higby, according to many women's statements, that they never recanted at all that Chauncey Higby forced himself on women. And I know it's disturbing. Whatever, you can just turn it off if it's disturbing, okay? But don't bring up all the disturbing things Michelle Stone says and then ask me over and over what I think of Michelle Stone, then get mad that I respond. That happened to me. And I was retaliated against in like the worst way possible. And other things. It was like I literally bowed my head, I don't want to get into an argument, but I had made, before I had this communication and before I watched Michelle Stone, I'd already responded to who killed Joseph Smith, and it was just so much of it was just wrong. And I felt like just sharing what I had found out, right? So this is why people in Utah would correct people if they called them polygamous, because they believed it was the same as spiritual wifery, which was inherently abusive and horrifying and awful.
Out of the hearts of honest men to drop in the gulf of fallen nature, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched.
I don't know. I've tried looking all this up again. I just want to duplicate. There we go. No, it was by Parley, Pratt, where he talks about spiritual wifery. But admittedly, why isn't it coming up? Sometimes I Google spiritual wifery and it comes up. Is that going to pull it up? No. He talked about it. It was on here. Spiritual. Oh my gosh. Why can't I find it? I don't know why. I just felt like and thought I would pull it up, but it is on there. I've seen it where Parley Pratt does defend plural marriage, but explains like how awful it is what some of the people in Nauvoo were still living after Joseph Smith's death, which was spiritual wifery. But
don't go that way.
Oh, thanks.
And let all the saints say amen. The entire crowd yelled amen twice.
Amen.
He then had notice given for the Relief Society to meet 2 days later to officially adopt the Voice of Innocence. The Relief Society proceeded to hold 4 overflowing meetings so every woman in Nauvoo could personally approve the message, which they did unanimously.
Womankind arise!
Joseph Smith commissioned, presented, and approved.
right, because it was abusing women. Eliza or Snow vehemently still in Nauvoo was like, she was asked, like, are you spiritual? I think, no, I was not a carnal spiritual wife of Joseph Smith. I was sealed to him. You know, it was righteous. It was different. It wasn't this evil, horrible thing that is like spiritual wifery, where you are temporary and abused and passed around and forced to have tools to take out the evidence and
Approved the Voice of Innocence because Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. On March 7th,
right, he wasn't, because he didn't love spiritual wifery.
in 1844, Joseph Smith addressed a crowd of over 8,000 and had 2 documents read. The first was his presidential.
Okay. When I get determined, I'm gonna find this. And I always put links. There we go. It's on here. Pratt. They better not have deleted this. Guys, I don't understand why. Okay, and then here you can see another William Law. He'll never get out of hell until Joseph Smith unlocks it for him. He's like best friends with Chauncey Higby, who was like the R word, and was talked about. He was outed May 29th, 1844 in the Nauvoo Neighbor as not getting consent from at least 4 women, and some of them they talk about, I'm going to show you the Voice of Innocence. They use the word pimp to describe J.C. Bennett, but Chauncey Higby did the same thing, and he wasn't getting consent. And I'm not going to pull it up, but they talked about consent, and it's very clear that was a little sore spot for Chauncey Higby, and they almost got him in jail. And it's sad that they didn't. But Brigham Young was on board attacking, I know, a spiritual wifery. Okay, cursed, we become the saviors of men. I'm going to scroll through it. So right now, Brigham Young is the head on this earth. He's not a hard master. Blah, balls of clay, the suit the mansions make for any vessels, da 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 da. Okay, there we go. So they're talking about specific, this is Parley Pratt. This is, I'll scroll up to show you, but they're selling women to one another. Like they're selling women, they're marrying women to more than one guy. Running into adultery, we can show that most of Rigdon's, they're accusing Rigdon of it. Followers are interested in spiritual life doctrine. Joseph Smith tried to get, not Brigham Young, Sidney Rigdon off, out of his calling, maybe excommunicated even. They enter in the spiritual life doctrine. Will Richards, I had an interview on Monday with Brother Smith. Smith said that Moses Smith. Anyway, from the stubborn disposition of any man in the world, I was disgusted with him. He was everything. I was witness to Brother Joseph and others reproving him of spiritual wifery. I'm just assuming, throwing that in there. It is all this secret instruction that is trying to cut our throats. I would just assume he... Ooh. George A. Smith gave up for the bad. Okay, I don't think I'll read anymore, but you can see that Brigham Young is not supportive of spiritual wifery, neither is Parley Pratt. And I think I'll go to the front so you can see who is speaking here. And he did live plural marriage, but he's not supportive of spiritual wifery because it was called polygamy and it was inherently abusive. It was awful. Come on. Well, it won't let me, so it's not meant to be. So moving on. But you can see polygamy now is defined as marriage to more than one spouse. But you can see Emily Partridge in 1892 saying, well, now polygamy means the same thing. But it's very clear that it used to mean the same thing as spiritual wife. When you read what Emma is, she's very, I think, I give Joseph Smith III credit as not being, he's not a horrible guy, but he did not quote people very well or accurately or right, but he often quotes people well enough that you understand that Utahns are very consistent in how horrifying spiritual wifery was, but they would defend plural marriage. Vienna Jackie's is one of those. He quotes her horribly, but it's still in the beginning, she's defending plural marriage, but then I can tell, I'm like, okay, I think this is accurate. She's talking about spiritual life. She starts crying and shaking and saying it's awful. But anyway, here's polygamy, according to Britannica, is a marriage to more than one spouse at a time. But there's a commitment, right? And typically, so polygamy, co-wives share one husband, or polyamory, Andrew, but really, like, that's not going to turn into polyamory. You really think one man's going to wait his turn? Just no. That's why you don't hear about it. And you hear a lot of horrible, violent things happening if you ever watch true crime. When people live polyamory, spiritual wifery, whatever. So the voice of innocence, let's go into it, and I just want to read a lot of it here. Basically, it was amended here by W.W. Phelps, by Emma Smith, but W.W. Phelps wrote it under the direction of Joseph Smith. And so it was read J.C. Bennett and his spiritual life system. So you understand these are different things. But Michelle is confused, and she thinks that spiritual wifery and this prostitution, well, that's just the same thing as what we today have codified. It isn't. That's totally different, Michelle. It's totally different when a woman's being passed from guy to guy as opposed to having one guy that she just doesn't see that much. Physically, totally different. It's different. And Okay. But it was amended by Emma Smith and read to the Relief Society. And they shouted amen, but it was also read to the men around February before this. But then she was so powerful, and they needed to understand March 1844. I'll just do this with my fingers. Let's add 9 to a 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, that's November when David Hiram Smith was when she was pregnant. Emma Smith is pregnant. She's a midwife, leading the Relief Society. They're fighting spiritual wifery because it's abuse of women. One of the biggest things the Relief Society, as you know, is to gather food ever since then and bring it to women that are in need. Because Chauncey Higby was telling little Catherine Warren, who was a widow of Hans Mill, look her up, that he would bring her food and she had children, if she just pleased a bunch of his friends and him, because apparently she was the most, and apparently she was the only one, according to Joseph Smith's letters to Emma. And they use the word, I'll just go into it. Emma's pregnant. She knows what happened. And I think her last speech is clear enough that I don't think it's, I think even Eliza Erskine was like, well, if she really said that, then, that she had some doubts that Emma really said what Joseph Smith, it was kind of known Joseph Smith III didn't always quote people very well, but he still quotes them well enough. You see, it was very consistent. They don't like the word polygamy. That's why I do say there's some good in it, right? Okay. And so Hiram Smith, I'll just read it. The corruption and wickedness manifested in its horrible deformity on the trial of Orsesimus E. Bostwick, I don't know how, last week for slandering Hiram Smith and the widows. This is important, widows of the city of Nauvoo, because it was a lot of widows that were attacked because they needed food. And Chauncey Higby and the Nauvoo Legion, you think they're good men and they can carry those heavy bags of, wheat and stuff. Then it ended up being the women's job because they were abusing women. Widows. They started prostituting widows. That's what spiritual wifery is. Of course, Joseph Smith's against it. Of course, Hiram Smith is against it. It was like December or January. I don't know. I have to look at when Joseph Smith got acquitted. Maybe it was December 1843. When did he go to Springville? I'm having brain fog. Now I sound stupid. I'll stop. But in Lucy Mack Smith's book that she dictated, she does put in actual quotes of Hiram Smith saying there were a lot of widows in Nauvoo. There were a lot of widows. And then there were a lot of men, a lot of women that were members of the church and had inactive husbands where they were excommunicated. And a lot of them were scumbags because they started living spiritual wifery. And a lot of the concerns that women had are the same as I hear today. If a woman has not been sealed to her kids or her husband because he's inactive or just isn't a member, how painful that is. It's the same thing. And that's how you got all these strange things that are confusing where Joseph Smith just, and Emma's just like, well, you can all be sealed to my husband for eternity only. That's fine. That'll fulfill the call for polygamy. And that did happen. I believe that too. I believe Emma was like, let's just do a lot of the eternity only ones. I think there's truth in that. But there was timing eternities, and she did support it, and she did love and support Melissa a lot. Okay. Anyway, slandering, Hiram Smith and the widows of Nauvoo, because he did do a speech, and he's like, there's so many widows, we need to take care of them and protect them from horrible men, has awakened all the kindly feelings of female benevolence, compassion, and pity for the softer sex. I like that she says that. To spread forth the mantle of charity, to shield the characters of the virtuous mothers, wives, and daughters of Nauvoo, because J.C. Bennett, if you read his book, he slanders. He's mad at Emma. He is so mad at her. I kind of laughed, but it's not funny, but he's mad at her. Why? Because she was fighting spiritual wifery. She took him down. And even though it's so depraved, it's awful and depraved what he did, he didn't go decades like Jeffrey Epstein, thankfully, right? Joseph figured it out. Hiram did the investigation on J.C. Bennett. And then they all were like, whoa, 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 and started talking to these women. And Joseph and Emma went and talked to the women and said, hey, if you are being told about this stuff, please come to me or just talk to Emma. I imagine they might have felt more comfortable just talking to Emma. So I think Emma heard all the stories. When we talk about a traumatized woman, she heard the most horrific things. Okay. And she's pregnant right now. To shield the characters, of wives and daughters of Nauvoo from the blasting breath and poisonous touch of debauchery vagabond rakes. So Catherine Warren was a widow. And you've got the Nyman sisters. Chauncey Higby's like, yeah, just come in here. And you got J.C. Bennett, just with Catherine Warren, who's just been so brainwashed to just let us show you what to do. And these girls are virgins. It just, what a horrific thing to go. It's so horrific what they went through. And I tried to find out if they were okay looking at Family Search, and they weren't. They weren't. And their names were spelled a little bit different in Family Search, but it ruined their lives. Chauncey Higby did. And reputation, you ruin someone's reputation. Yeah. Anyway, who've jammed themselves in the city to offer fire at the shrines of infamy, grace, and degradation, as they and their kindred spirits have done in all the great city throughout the world, corrupting their way on earth, bringing women, poor defenseless women, to wretchedness and ruin. She's talking about spiritual wifery. And such ignoble blood now begins to stain the peaceable habitations of the saints and taint the pure air of the only city in the world that pretends to work righteousness in union. And I don't think she means that in a fake way. For happiness gloriously as such ungodly wretches burning or smarting with the sting of their own shame, having doubtless she's really mad, transported with them some of the miserable dupes of their lasciviousness, for the purpose of defiling the fame of this goodly city, mildewing the honesty of our mothers. J.C. Bennett is accusing Emma of spiritual wifery, of abusing women. She did the opposite. He's mad at her. And there's so many high council minutes. All these women. I believe the women. Right. I believe the women in the high council minutes. Truth is how you save testimonies, you guys. Not twisting words and saying words meant something different than they did in the 1840s. The definitions of words changed. Michelle Stone's confused, you guys. That's all it is. For the purpose of defiling the fame and mildewing the honesty and blasting the chastity of widows. Sarah Miller was a widow of Hauntsville. Catherine Warren was a widow. Those are some of the women that gave permission for their stories to be softened and published in the Nauvoo Neighbor less than a month before Joseph Smith was killed by these men. Corrupting the virtue of our unsuspecting daughters, Nyman sisters, becomes used defense of our rights and for the glory of fathers, for the honor of our mothers, for the happiness of our husbands, for the welfare of our dear children, to rebuke such an outrage upon the sanctity of society, to thwart such a blow at the hallowed marriage covenant, to ward off such poisoned daggers from the hearts of our innocent daughters. She's talking about abuse, talking about Chauncey Higby of Nauvoo, and writing with indelible ink upon such every villain. Vitar, beware of the wretch, and so put in every virtuous woman's hand a rod. This is consistent with what Joseph Smith III quoted Vienna Jackies is saying. I'm saying, Joseph Smith, go and get a rod, and you just run. If someone comes to your door talking about spiritual wifery, they don't care about consent. They're abusers. They're basically Jeffrey Epstein. They're horrible men. You run them out. Yeah, I agree. Tormentors of domestic felicity with vengeance throughout the world. Curse the man that preys upon female virtue. Curse the man that slanders a woman. So Emma, the entire relief site was slandered. Their reputations were he was trying to ruin their reputations because he was mad. He's accusing Joseph Smith exactly what he did. But there's so many testimonies of the entire Relief Society saying, no, we are not spiritual wives of Joseph Smith. Do you understand that? And it's very clear when Eliza R. Snow brings that up again. She's like, no, I was not a carnal spiritual wife of Joseph Smith. First, the man that slanders the women, let the dignity, righteous dignity of insulted innocence, virtue, spurn him from society. Let the dignity of mothers of Israel kick the blood of a thirsty pimp. This is not celestial plural marriage, okay? It just isn't, because this is prostituting women. I don't understand where Michelle got so confused on this. Brigham Young did not pass his wives around to other men. And I don't think he was accused. I think he was so loud and fierce, like he didn't have... And they left, they went to... So he was just a polygamist. That was his accusation. He was. According to the definition, post, 1890. At what... I don't know at what point... It'd be great to see history of the definition of the word polygamy. I don't know. I'm probably not going to find anything there. Let's keep reading. Let the widows and wives. She keep talking about widows again, because that is who Chauncey Higbee and J.C. Bennett were. They were looking for the most vulnerable. That's what narcissists do. They look for people that are chronically ill, vulnerable. Widows are poor and vulnerable. Well, they were the best targets for prostitution, right? Who tread in the footsteps of their queenly mother Eve, and drive such as Cain and Nod, and let the timid daughters of Nauvoo drive such canker worms more than the pestilence. I think if anyone talked to them, they're like, okay, she does not agree with this. J.C. Bennett's a liar. There were some people who went through and okay. They are not living spiritual wifery, I'm gonna let us know. Shun them as the serpent of the land and the shark of the sea. My God, is there not female virtue and valor enough in this city to let such men die of the rot, that the sexton may carry their putrid bodies beyond the limits of the city for food, for vultures, for ego, refuse them female courtesy, deny them the pleasures of family correspondence and family. They're really mad at these people, and I understand why. Family intercourse, curse the woman that speaks out to such rotten flesh. And Joseph does have letters talking to Emma, talking about, using a not nice word of talking about women being prostituted, right? Curse the man that will harbor them, and curse the lawyer that was stooped to the dignity of his profession to plead for them. The apologer is meanism, or female virtue is a pearl of great price, and should glitter in the abodes of men, as in the mansions of bliss and honor and glory. And every attempt of a man to seduce that virtue, again, that's Chauncey, if you read the Nauvoo. So you understand the fight against polygamy was a fight against spiritual wifery. And he's got evidence of that, again, with what Parley Pratt said. Is it? Oh, sorry, it's right here. Okay, so Brigham Young's in charge. James Bennett and company into the wilderness. It makes no sense why you can't Google and look up spiritual wifery. They need to let us look that up to help save some testimonies here, but I just don't understand. I don't understand that. I probably spelled something wrong, maybe, but it's sometimes I can find this by Googling, searching in their search bar, and sometimes I just can't. But this is probably Pratt, but they're talking about, Brigham Young is against spiritual wifery. Do you understand that? Please, you guys, please understand that. Brigham Young talked as plain as man can be, and he accused him of stealing the Gentiles. I'm not going to read every single part. I'm just showing you just basically the beginning of it. Maybe C. Kimball, who'd rather see Brother Smith with us away. So there was another Smith, right? Rebuked by President Smith. But anyway, they go into spiritual wifery a little bit here. And they're talking about William Law and Foster. William Law was not some pious good guy. Okay. And then you see, like Joseph Smith. Well, you will not come out of hell until Joseph Smith lets him out of hell. That's how much they hate spiritual wifery, but they are living plural marriage, right? Selling women to one another and running into adultery. So this is echoing the voice of innocence, the spiritual life doctrine. Rigdon is living the spiritual life, and then Smith said, okay, I just want to, goes on long, but But you see, this is after Joseph Smith died. They're denouncing spiritual wifery. Just understand that, okay? It's very Meg Stout found the same thing, that Brigham Young was fighting spiritual wifery, which is what this is talking about. Woe to the wretch that would follow the blood-stained mobbers of Missouri. And they were a lot of women. Like, a lot of women were abused in Missouri. And what did the man, a lawyer, anyway. Has any man a wife? Benevolence whispers such beasts of the field that they not wrong nor kill the lambs. Has any man a widowed mother, humanity, da-da-da. I'm going to skim through some of it. Joseph Smith resolved to unite Joseph, the mayor of our city. John C. Bennett created the charter so that they could have a mayor, so that they could have police. I mean, the Nauvoo Legion, but they had actual police. William Law was against the police, so was Chauncey, right? Because they wanted to abuse women. And they had like $1,000 fine, over $1,000 if you were doing that. Think about it. Okay, resolved unanimously, unqualified, disproportionate to the saints of Nauvoo, but this is W.W. Phelps. Okay, unanimously that we will render credence to the doctrine of Paul, that neither a man is without the woman, neither is a woman without the man in the Lord. Like, be committed. Like, these people are, after Joseph Smith died, they're like, people are living spiritual wifery. And they're just marrying women all over. They're not committed. That's what Parley Pratt was saying. Yet, we raise our voices and hands against John C. Bennett's spiritual wife system. Which, again, it was communally assigning temporary wives. Very abusive, and it is what The Handmaid's Tale is. People try to say, oh, that's polygamy, that's this, and I don't know. They might draw, and I haven't watched, I don't want to. Like, I don't really want to watch Michelle Stone. Like, I was trying to see, like, why am I a little curious, but I guess I did a little bit better in some videos. This is not one of the better ones, I'm sorry. This is one of the rants and rambling and pulling up stuff, and I apologize, but I just felt like I may as well do this today. And I was trying to see, why am I getting so many views? And then, like, why does this come up? Looking at me and that makes no sense. It kind of upsets me a little. It triggered me. I haven't looked at Michelle Stone in so long. But Cochrane, that's what spiritual wifery was. It was not celestial. It wasn't one man, more than one wife. That's not what spiritual wifery was. Michelle, honey, please just Google that word. Google that word. Why don't you talk about the real women that were abused? Please. I beg of you. Honey, please do that. Anyway, continuing on, as a scheme of prolific to seduce women, and they that harp upon it wish to make it popular for the convenience of their cupidity, marriage, bed, and defiled honorable, let polygamy, which they thought was spiritual wifery, bigamy, where a man isn't really being truthful, not really taken care of, fornication, adultery, and prostitution. Joseph Smith always was against adultery. So was Brigham Young. People still got excommunicated for adultery, even though plural marriage was allowed, but you needed to be a good guy to live it. And it isn't a cure for men that have self-control issues. Like, if you have self-control issues, you're never going to live polygamy. Okay, do you understand that? In the eternity, you're not going to. Oh, no, you're not. If you can't treat one woman right, no. And it isn't some better, higher way of living that men that are having self-control issues and, I'm sorry, porn issues, like, it's not a result of your deserve. It's something you deserve. It's just an unfortunate result of those men that think they deserve and are clinging to their carnal desires, that they're being excommunicated. And then you have a lot more women in heaven, right? Or you just had a lot more women in the church at this time. Or a lot more women that had inactive husbands back then that thought Christ was coming tomorrow, and they had anxiety. Like, I don't want to be without my kids, and I want exaltation. But Joseph's like, okay, well, you can. Emma's like, oh, you can just be eternity only sealing. You can stay married to your husband, and then you have all the blessings, and be sealed to your kids, and Joseph Smith will become their father in the next life, which is like, I think that was the thing that Joseph Smith and Emma did wrong. And the church did say on the website that Emma was pushing for those, right? I think I already said that, but yeah, they do use the word polygamy. Joseph Smith did denounce polygamy, bigamy, fornication, adultery, prostitution. Be found out of the hearts of men, honest men, to drop in the gulf of nature where the worm dieth not, and the fire's not quenched, and let the saints say amen. And I thought they said amen 3 times. Like, I re-recorded this. I'm like, I think they said it 3, not 2, but I guess on here they do say 2. Michelle's just wrong to say that spiritual wifery is the same. And it was very clear when I read Emily Partridge's statements in the Temple Act case. She's like, well, yeah, now it means this, but we've been rejecting the word for 50 years. Since the 1840s, it's the 1890s. And everyone knows that's true. I think Michelle knows that. Michelle, don't you know that? You know that Utahns didn't like the word polygamy because it meant spiritual wifery. It meant prostitution. And it's a horrible thing. None of the prophets supported spiritual wifery. None of them. But some of them did live celestial plural marriage, and it did create a lot of missionaries. Because there were a lot of crappy men in Nauvoo that chose to do crappy things and got excommunicated. So in order to have a righteous generation, you need a good father, right? And so that's, unfortunately, Chauncey Higbee. He was young, 20, and the Higbees, and unfortunately, who knows how many, most of the men probably did join the Nauvoo Legion, and I don't know how many of these young men that hadn't been married yet had already been going around with some of these women. I don't know the numbers. And people that have researched it had a hard time finding the numbers, but it was, 1 is too many. And if this is disturbing, you should just turn it off. And if you watch some disturbing things that Michelle Stone says, well, don't walk up to me and bring up disturbing things. I'm probably going to talk about other disturbing things. Seriously, think about it. Have a good day.